If you've been to Vicksburg National Military Park here lately, you've walked by an opportunity to buy a little stuffed Old Douglas as you left the gift shop. Old Douglas was a Dromedary camel, a lot like this guy, and I'm going to tell you his story as we visit the graves of some of the men that handled him. Old Douglas was the mascot of the 43rd Mississippi Infantry, and his marker is one of the most popular sites to visit in the Vicksburg National Military Park. We're in Friendship Cemetery in Columbus, Mississippi now because that's where the grave of the guy that Old Douglas's story starts with is located. And oh yeah, if you like this kind of content, why don't you boop that like button? Some people don't realize this, but Jefferson Davis was the Secretary of War during the 1850s. He started a little experiment called the United States Camel Corps. Many people think Old Douglas was part of the Camel Corps, but I think he simply came in through the port of Mobile at a time when people were experimenting with camels as beasts of burden on plantations and such. The camels seemed to perform pretty well for the United States Army at Camp Verde, a place a little west of San Antonio. Old Douglas was owned by this guy, Lieutenant William Hargrove of Company B of the 43rd. And Hargrove presented Old Douglas to Colonel William H. Moore of the 43rd in 1862. Years after the war, a guy that was a member of the 3rd Texas Cavalry wrote that the 43rd Mississippi was remembered for three distinct reasons. They had a whole lot of baggage, they had the tallest man and the largest boy in the Army, and its colonel used a camel to carry his private baggage. Colonel Moore assigned Old Douglas to the regimental band, and he carried their instruments in knapsacks. The camel first served the 43rd when they were with General Price in the Iuka campaign. It took the horses and the mules a little time to get used to Old Douglas, but they did. His keeper would chain him to keep him from wandering off, but Douglas could snap any kind of chain, and then he would just graze at his own pleasure. He never left the regiment or interfered with anything that did not interrupt him anyway. When the regiment was ready to move out, Douglas's handler would simply lead him up to a pile of things he was expected to carry, give him a command, he would drop to his knees, his goods would be loaded all up, and then he would be told to get up and off he would go. The camel became familiar to the whole army, so thus the 43rd was known as the Camel Regiment. Colonel William Hudson Moore, whose grave you're looking at now, was 6'2", and he weighed around 200 pounds. He started the war with the 11th Mississippi and was sent to Virginia where he was injured, but subsequently sent home to recuperate and raise men for the 43rd. Colonel Moore was wounded at the Battle of Corinth on October the 4th and died there on the 9th of November, 1862. His family received his personal effects on Christmas Eve of that year. Colonel Moore's grave is located in what locals call Taylor Cemetery in Monroe County, Mississippi. And just in case any of you out there decide to try to find it for yourself, Find a Grave has this one wrong. And since I'm not so sure that I'm not trespassing, I'm not going to give you the location either. I came upon a guy in Aberdeen that told me where to find this grave. Old Douglas continued serving the 43rd even after Colonel Moore's death. Old Douglas, along with the 43rd, endured the siege of Vicksburg. One afternoon, during the last days of the siege, he was grazing on a hill behind the 43rd. He was hit several times and fell in a piteous, almost human moan, where he died. All the Confederates who saw this were incredibly mad at what they considered a useless cruelty. One of them used his field glasses where he noticed a Federal officer standing in front of a patch of woods. He called over 6 Confederate sharpshooters and directed their fire toward the dark line against the woods. The Union commander threw up his arms and fell. The Union commander was wounded severely but did live. I believe that the starving Confederate soldiers then carved up their beloved mascot and ate him. After the surrender of Vicksburg, Union Army soldiers cut up the bones of old Douglas and sold them as souvenirs to Yankees who visited the site of the siege. And thus ended one of the most unique stories of the Civil War, and it got its start right here in Northeast Mississippi. Well, I hope you've enjoyed learning a little bit about Old Douglas and the 43rd today while we jumped around between Vicksburg and Friendship Cemetery in Columbus and, well, Old Taylor Cemetery in Monroe County. Thank you.